It's every day for a fortnight. Bow, 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 bow. Milestone alert. I really do have to get myself some actual sound effects for that. I am going to do as I promised the other night, and I'm going to do this episode completely without edits. So I'll filter out background noise, but I'm not going to cut anything. So you'll hear every stop, every start, every every pause, every restart, and we'll just see how that goes. I am sitting in my mail truck outside a franchise of one of the biggest fast food restaurants in North America. And I'm thinking about systems, and particularly about incentives. So, where I work, there is a stark confrontational divide between labor, workers, and management. And on some level, yes, it was ever thus, and it really should be, and we each have our own interests to guard. But where I'm working right now, I've never seen quite such, and maybe it's partially because, maybe it's entirely because this is my first union job, but the antagonism, the us versus them mentality, I've never seen anywhere else. The carriers assume that management is full of liars and cheaters, and all they want to do is run us ragged and steal as much of our time as they can. And management seems to think that carriers are all scoundrels, and we're going to also cheat and lie and try to get out of work and waste time on the clock. And it's kind of wild how much distrust there is on both sides. And I think a lot of that has to do with how the system is set up. The incentive for the carrier is to take as much time doing as little work as possible, because we get paid hourly, most of us. There are some, for carriers who've been there for longer, there are some guaranteed minimums and things like that. But in general, we get paid by the hour, and we get overtime at a certain point. And so, yeah, our best interests are served by going slow, by going, not for nothing, that's also a safety issue, right? When you're rushing, doing the kind of labor that we do, you get injured, you crash your truck. There's all kinds of reasons for safety to go slow and steady. But yeah, our incentives are to maximize our time. For management, the pressure that they're getting from executives and systems higher up is to minimize the amount of time and the amount of money that they have to then pay the carriers to get everything going faster and faster and faster, to get us out the door earlier, to get us back in the door earlier. And the supervisors get pressure from the station managers get pressure from the postmasters get pressure from somewhere up above to maximize that efficiency. And so it creates the incentives for both sides that work directly counter to the incentives of the other side. And for either side, there's no positive reward for compliance, for cooperation. I guess management probably gets bonuses of some sort, depending on efficiency and numbers and that kind of thing. But particularly for the carriers, there's no bonus, there's no benefit, no positive incentive to be more efficient, to be more speedy. There's just threats of punishment. There's just oversight. There's surveillance. There's being chastised, and then there's formal and informal reprimands. And so I've been thinking a lot about like how I would design the system differently if I wanted to provide a positive incentive for the carrier to work faster, still safely, of course. I'm gonna say right off, it's I mean, full disclosure, I don't have any good ideas right off the top of my head. I have, and nobody at this point, nobody gives a shit about my opinion on any of it, carriers or management, because they all know their positions and they all have been in them for uh, some of them for longer than I've had a job ever. So um, it doesn't excuse, of course, individuals from being assholes. There are genuinely people in management who seem to enjoy trying to sniff out or create circumstances of carriers trying to cheat the system and enjoy wielding the power of punishment and reprimands. And there are, I'm sure, carriers who do take longer on the clock than they need to. Although most of those folks, again, are working by the hour. So it's my sympathy is much easier to tap into for labor than it ever has been for management. But regardless, I'm sure there are, at least on some level, there are less than stellar actors on both sides. But I think that to me is less important than the fact that the system pits us directly against each other, even though we're supposedly striving for a common goal, which is to get the mail delivered accurately and timely and efficiently. And so, like, this is just one example, I think, where we overlook the system and the incentives and we tend to blame the individual, because carriers and management will all have their opinions of either side, and it's always about management is this way, carriers are this way, and there's very little recognition of the fact that that's how it's structured. The system rewards us for some behaviors and doesn't reward us for others, and reinforces the behaviors it rewards, and etc. And I think this is a problem that we often have, and in America at least, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but in the United States, we virtually always default to personal responsibility as being the source of both success and failure. We think of people with wealth as being self-made or having worked hard, and we think of people experiencing homelessness or addiction as having had some failure of the character or bad choices. And we even, I think, tend to do this to people who have health problems. We tend to make a moral judgment and assume that there is, at least on some level, something wrong with their character that put them in this situation. And we very rarely we very rarely are able to take a step back and look at the systems that we live in and the behaviors they incentivize and the rewards and punishments, and also the tasks that they make more difficult and the tasks that they make easier and the people for whom they make tasks more difficult. The fact that lobbying organizations representing landlords have way more power than tenants, and so tenant law is skewed in favor of the people who own the real estate and not the people who are actually paying the rent. The fact that health insurance is tied to employment for some huge percentage of people, and so if your employment is stable, then your health care is going to suffer, and your health is probably going to suffer, which will make it harder for you to be employed, and the feedback loop that creates. Even, deeper things like how redlining in the 40s created neighborhoods that had concentrations of poorer people, darker skinned people, and then those neighborhoods were labeled as undervalued or under resourced or just bad, and then industry was allowed to put factories and manufacturing near those neighborhoods, and they were less likely to get have trees and green space, and so these things contributed to worse health comes and shorter lifespans for people who lived in those neighborhoods. So that now in 2025, one of the best predictors of your overall health in your lifetime is the zip code that you were born in. And there are countless examples. These are just the ones that I'm coming up with off the top of my head without having had the opportunity to do any immediate research and not stopping to look anything up, because I don't want to have a huge gap of dead air while I'm reading. And I promise not to cut. So I guess I'm putting this here as a reminder to myself, and maybe to you if it's useful, that hard work and personal responsibility and all those things play a role in our outcomes. But so frankly does luck. And so frankly do a lot of things that look like luck, but that really are down to the way the system is organized, the kinds of people and actions that it rewards, and the incentives that are there to spur, manipulate, incentivize. I said incentivize again, to prompt action. And so I think the real point is trying to give the individual some grace if they are struggling, by pausing to think about how the system may have contributed to their struggling. So that's a dumpster being emptied right next to my truck, and what has been on my mind today. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you again soon.